Part 1. When power goes wrong, it was a sunny Tuesday afternoon when everything changed for a young college student driving home from her part-time job at the local bookstore. The radio was playing her favorite song, and she was thinking about the assignment due tomorrow when she saw the flashing lights in her rearview mirror. Officer Johnson had been patrolling this neighborhood for 12 years. He knew every street corner and every shortcut. Today felt different, though. He had been having a rough week at home, and his supervisor had been on his case about meeting quotas. When he spotted the small blue sedan going slightly over the speed limit, he saw an opportunity. The young woman, let's call her Amy, pulled over carefully and rolled down her window. Her hands were shaking slightly as she reached for her driver's license. She had only been pulled over once before, and that officer had been polite and professional. She expected this would be the same routine stop. "Do you know why I stopped you today?" Officer Johnson asked, his voice carrying an edge that made Amy nervous. "I think I might have been going a bit fast, officer." "I'm sorry about that," Amy replied, honestly, trying to be respectful. What happened next would haunt Amy for months to come. Officer Johnson claimed he smelled something suspicious in the car. Amy knew this wasn't true. She didn't smoke or drink, and her car was clean. But the officer insisted on conducting a search. Standing on the busy sidewalk, Amy felt exposed and vulnerable as Officer Johnson made her step out of the vehicle. Several people walking by stopped to watch, sensing something wasn't right about the situation. Among them was Dr. Williams, a respected lawyer who had spent 20 years fighting for people's rights in court. Dr. Williams had seen this pattern before. She recognized the signs of an officer overstepping boundaries. Her phone was already in her hand, recording everything that was happening. She had learned from experience that evidence was crucial in situations like this. "Excuse me, officer," Dr. Williams called out, approaching the scene. "I'm an attorney, and I'd like to make sure proper procedures are being followed here." Officer Johnson looked annoyed by the interruption. He was used to conducting his business without interference from the community. In his mind, his badge gave him the authority to do whatever he deemed necessary. "This is official police business, ma'am. Please step back," he responded curtly. But Dr. Williams didn't step back. She had seen too many people's rights violated to walk away now. She positioned herself where she could clearly see and record everything while staying at a safe distance. Amy felt a small surge of relief knowing someone was watching and advocating for her. She had been feeling increasingly uncomfortable with how the officer was conducting the search. His actions seemed unnecessary and inappropriate for a simple traffic stop. "Officer, I cooperated fully. Can you please explain what you're looking for?" Amy asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Officer Johnson's response was to become even more aggressive in his search methods. He seemed determined to find something, anything, that would justify his actions. When he found nothing in the car, he turned his attention back to Amy in a way that crossed clear professional boundaries. What happened next shocked everyone watching. Officer Johnson made Amy endure an inappropriate and humiliating search right there on the public street. Dr. Williams continued recording, her anger growing with each passing moment. Other witnesses pulled out their phones too, understanding they were seeing something that needed to be documented. Amy felt her face burning with embarrassment and violation. She had never experienced anything like this before. The officer's actions were clearly wrong, but she felt powerless to stop what was happening. All she could think about was getting through this nightmare and going home. "That's enough," Dr. Williams shouted when she couldn't stay silent any longer. "What you're doing is completely inappropriate and illegal." Officer Johnson finally seemed to realize he had an audience. He looked around at the growing crowd of witnesses, all holding phones and recording his every move. For the first time, since the stop began, he appeared uncertain about his actions. Dr. Williams approached Amy, who was now visibly shaking and trying to compose herself. "Are you okay, honey? What just happened was not legal and you have rights." Amy nodded but couldn't speak. She felt a mixture of relief that someone had intervened and fear about what might happen next. Would anyone believe her word against a police officer's? "I'm Dr. Williams, and I'm a civil rights attorney," the older woman continued gently. You don't have to face this alone. What happened here was wrong, and there are people who can help you get justice. Officer Johnson hastily wrote Amy a ticket for speeding and told her she was free to go. He seemed eager to end the encounter now that so many people were watching and recording. He got back in his patrol car quickly, but the damage was already done. As Amy drove away with shaking hands, Dr. Williams was already making phone calls. She had witnessed clear misconduct, and she knew exactly what needed to happen next. This wouldn't be swept under the rug like so many other incidents she had seen over the years. The witnesses dispersed slowly, but many exchanged contact information with Dr. Williams. They understood they had seen something significant, and they were willing to speak up about it. The power of community was already beginning to show itself. That evening, Amy sat in her apartment, still trying to process what had happened. She felt angry, embarrassed, and confused all at once. When her phone rang and she heard Dr. Williams's warm voice offering support and guidance, she began to realize that this terrible experience might be the beginning of something important. Meanwhile, Officer Johnson went home thinking the incident would be forgotten by morning. He had no idea that his actions had been recorded by multiple people, or that he had just encountered someone who would make sure justice was served. Part 2. Finding courage. The next morning, Amy woke up hoping yesterday had been just a bad dream. But the ticket on her nightstand reminded her that everything had really happened. She stared at the ceiling, wondering if she should just pay the fine and try to forget about the whole thing. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Williams. "Good morning, Amy. I hope you're doing okay. Would you like to meet for coffee today? No pressure, but I think it would help to talk." Amy hesitated. Part of her wanted to hide and pretend nothing had happened. But another part of her knew that what Officer Johnson did was wrong, and maybe Dr. Williams could help her understand what her options were. They met at a small cafe downtown. Dr. Williams ordered them both coffee and found a quiet corner table. She could see that Amy was still shaken from yesterday's events. "How are you feeling today?" Dr. Williams asked gently. Amy stirred her coffee nervously. "Confused, I guess, and embarrassed. I keep thinking maybe I did something wrong or maybe I'm overreacting." Dr. Williams shook her head firmly. "Amy, let me be very clear about something. What happened to you yesterday was not your fault. Not even a little bit. That officer violated your rights and crossed lines that should never be crossed." "But he's a police officer," Amy said quietly. "Who's going to believe me over him?" Dr. Williams leaned forward. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that lets bad officers get away with misconduct. Your story matters, and you have more support than you realize." She pulled out her phone and showed Amy the video she had recorded. "This isn't just your word against his anymore. Multiple people witnessed what happened, and we have it all documented." Amy watched the video with a mixture of anger and sadness. Seeing herself in that vulnerable position brought back all the feelings from yesterday. But she also noticed something else. The clear look of concern on the faces of the people watching, and the determination in Dr. Williams's voice as she spoke up. "I've been doing this work for 20 years, Dr. Williams continued. "I've seen officers like Johnson before. They count on people being too scared or too embarrassed to speak up. But when someone finally does, it opens the door for others to come forward too." Amy looked up from the phone. "Others? You mean this has happened before?" "I believe so. Officers who abuse their power rarely do it just once. They get comfortable with it, especially when they think no one will challenge them." Dr. Williams explained how these situations typically played out. Often, victims would file complaints that got buried in paperwork or dismissed without proper investigation. Sometimes officers would get a slap on the wrist and continue their behavior. "But things are changing," she said. "Communities are demanding accountability. When we have solid evidence like this video, and brave people willing to speak up, we can make a real difference." Amy felt a spark of something she hadn't felt since yesterday. Hope. "What would I need to do?" Dr. Williams outlined the process. They could file a formal complaint with the police department's Internal Affairs Division. They could also pursue legal action through the courts. Most importantly, They could work with community organizations to ensure this incident led to broader changes in how officers were trained and supervised. "I won't lie to you," Dr. Williams said honestly. "It won't be easy. There might be people who try to discourage you or question your motives, but you won't be alone in this fight." Over the next few days, Dr. Williams introduced Amy to other people who had experienced similar situations. There was Patricia, a nurse who had been unfairly targeted during a routine traffic stop 3 years ago. There was Robert, a teacher who had witnessed inappropriate police behavior at a community event and had tried to file a complaint, only to have it ignored. Each person Amy met helped her understand that she wasn't alone, and that speaking up was important not just for herself, but for everyone in the community who deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. Meanwhile, Officer Johnson was going about his regular duties, unaware that his actions were being investigated. He had been involved in questionable incidents before, but they had always been swept under the rug or explained away. He assumed this time would be no different. His partner, Officer Martinez, had noticed Johnson's behavior becoming more aggressive over the past few months. Martinez had been considering saying something to their supervisor, but he wasn't sure how to approach the situation. The police department culture often discouraged officers from reporting on their colleagues. Dr. Williams was building a comprehensive case. She reviewed Johnson's personnel file and found several previous complaints that had been dismissed or resulted in minimal consequences. She interviewed witnesses from Amy's incident and discovered that Johnson had a pattern of conduct that needed to be addressed. Amy's parents were initially worried about their daughter getting involved in what they saw as a complicated legal battle. But after meeting Dr. Williams and understanding the broader implications, they became supportive of Amy's decision to pursue justice. "We raised you to stand up for what's right," Amy's mother told her, "even when it's difficult." The local news picked up the story after Dr. Williams reached out to a reporter she trusted. The reporter, Lisa Chen, had covered similar cases before and understood the importance of handling the story responsibly. She interviewed Amy with her consent and reviewed the video evidence. When the news story aired, Amy felt nervous but also empowered. She had found her voice and was using it to speak truth to power. Phone calls and messages of support started, coming in from community members who had their own stories to share. Officer Johnson watched the news report with growing anger and concern. For the first time, he realized that his actions might have real consequences. His supervisor called him into the office the next morning for a serious conversation about his conduct. Dr. Williams knew this was just the beginning. Real change would require sustained effort and community involvement. But seeing Amy transform from a scared victim into a determined advocate gave her hope that this time would be different. Amy looked at herself in the mirror that evening and saw someone she almost didn't recognize. She still felt hurt by what had happened, but she also felt strong. She was no longer just a victim. She was someone fighting for justice, not just for herself, but for everyone who deserved better treatment from those sworn to protect and serve. Part 3. The Community Rises. The phone in Dr. Williams' office wouldn't stop ringing. Ever since Amy's story hit the news 3 days ago, people from all over the city had been calling with their own experiences. Each conversation revealed another piece of a much bigger puzzle. Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman from the South Side, called to share how Officer Johnson had been unnecessarily rough with her grandson during a minor incident at the park. A college student named Kevin described being pulled over and treated disrespectfully for no apparent reason. Even other police officers were quietly reaching out, expressing concern about Johnson's behavior. Amy sat in Dr. Williams' office, listening to these stories with a mixture of sadness and determination. She had thought her experience was isolated, but now she realized it was part of a pattern that had been going on for years. "I had no idea so many people had similar experiences," Amy said, shaking her head. "How did he get away with this for so long?" Dr. Williams sighed. "Unfortunately, it's a common story. People file complaints, but they often get lost in the system. Victims feel powerless, witnesses don't want to get involved, and departments sometimes protect their own instead of protecting the community. But this time felt different. The video evidence was clear. The community was paying attention, and social media was amplifying the story in ways that couldn't be ignored. Amy's college classmates had organized a peaceful gathering on campus to show support for accountability and law enforcement. What started as a small group of friends holding signs grew into hundreds of students, faculty, and community members coming together. At the gathering, Amy spoke publicly for the first time about her experience. Her voice shook at first, but as she saw the supportive faces in the crowd, she found her strength. "What happened to me could happen to anyone," she said. "But we don't have to accept it as normal. We can demand better from those who are supposed to serve and protect us." The crowd responded with applause and cheers of support. Many people approached Amy afterward to share their own stories or offer help with her case. Meanwhile, Officer Johnson was feeling the pressure. His supervisor had placed him on desk duty pending a formal internal investigation. His colleagues were treating him differently, and he could feel their judgment even when nothing was said directly. At home, his wife confronted him about the news coverage. "Is this true? Did you really do what they're saying?" Johnson tried to dismiss it. "It's all blown out of proportion. I was just doing my job. These people don't understand what it's like to be a police officer." But his wife wasn't convinced. She had noticed changes in his behavior over the past year. More anger, more complaints about his work, less patience with their own children. The man she married had been different. Dr. Williams was working around the clock, coordinating with other attorneys, community leaders, and civil rights organizations. She organized town hall meetings where residents could voice their concerns about police conduct and share ideas for reform. The first town hall meeting was packed. People stood along the walls when all the seats were filled. The police chief attended, looking uncomfortable as resident after resident shared stories of problematic encounters with officers. "We're not anti-police," explained Robert, the teacher who had become one of Amy's supporters. "We want good officers to be supported and bad officers to be held accountable. That makes everyone safer." The police chief promised to review policies and procedures, but many in the audience remained skeptical. They had heard similar promises before. Amy found herself becoming an unofficial spokesperson for the movement. Local reporters sought her out for interviews, and she appeared on radio shows to discuss police accountability. Each time she spoke, she felt more confident and more committed to seeing this through. The internal affairs investigation was moving slowly, which frustrated the community. Dr. Williams filed formal legal papers, initiating a lawsuit against both Officer Johnson and the police department. This got the attention of city officials who had been hoping the controversy would fade away. One evening, Amy received a phone call that surprised her. It was Officer Martinez, Johnson's partner, asking if they could meet privately. They met at a small diner outside of town. Martinez looked nervous as he sat across from Amy. "I want you to know that not all officers are like Johnson," he began. "Some of us have been concerned about his behavior for a while, but we didn't know how to address it." Amy listened as Martinez explained the culture within the department that discouraged officers from reporting on each other. He shared specific incidents he had witnessed where Johnson had crossed lines or treated people unfairly. "Why are you telling me this now?" Amy asked. Martinez looked down at his coffee. "Because what happened to you was wrong, and because staying silent makes me part of the problem. I've been a police officer for 15 years because I wanted to help people. Johnson's actions hurt everyone, the community, good officers, and the profession itself." He agreed to provide a statement supporting Amy's case and to testify about Johnson's pattern of misconduct. This was a breakthrough that Dr. Williams had hoped for but hadn't expected. The news that a fellow officer was supporting Amy's case sent shockwaves through the police department. Some officers criticized Martinez for betraying the brotherhood, while others quietly expressed support for his decision to speak up. Community support continued to grow. Local businesses put up signs supporting police accountability. Churches held special services focused on justice and healing. The high school where Robert taught organized an assembly about civil rights and civic responsibility. Amy's parents were amazed by their daughter's transformation. The shy college student who had been victimized just weeks ago had become a powerful advocate for change. "I'm proud of you," her father told her one evening. You've turned something terrible into something meaningful. Officer Johnson's situation continued to deteriorate. The internal investigation had uncovered evidence of multiple policy violations. The district attorney's office was reviewing the case for possible criminal charges. His union representative advised him that his job was likely in jeopardy. For the first time since the incident began, Johnson started to realize the full consequences of his actions. The protective bubble of his badge and uniform was finally bursting, and he was being held accountable like any other citizen would be. Dr. Williams could see that momentum was building for real change. The community was engaged, officials were paying attention, and there was finally enough pressure to force meaningful reform, rather than just empty promises. Amy looked back on everything that had happened and realized that while she would never be grateful for the traumatic experience itself, she was proud of how she had responded to it. She had found her voice, built a community of support, and was helping to create positive change that would benefit others in the future. Part 4. The moment of truth. The courthouse steps were crowded with supporters as Amy walked up to the building. 3 months had passed since that terrible day, and now she was about to face Officer Johnson in court. Her hands were shaking, but Dr. Williams squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. "Remember, you're not alone in there," Dr. Williams whispered. "We have the truth on our side." Inside the courtroom, Amy could see Officer Johnson sitting at the defendant's table with his lawyer. He looked different now, smaller somehow, without his uniform and badge. The confident swagger he had shown that day was completely gone. The judge entered and everyone stood. Judge Anderson had a reputation for being fair but firm. She had reviewed all the evidence beforehand and understood the community's interest in this case. Amy's lawyer, working alongside Dr. Williams, presented their case methodically. They showed the video that Dr. Williams had recorded, which made several people in the courtroom gasp. Even though many had seen it on the news, watching it in the formal setting of a courtroom made it feel more serious and real. "This video clearly shows Officer Johnson overstepping his authority and violating my client's constitutional rights," the lawyer explained to the jury. "What we see here is not proper police procedure. It's an abuse of power." When it was Amy's turn to testify, she walked to the witness stand on unsteady legs. The courtroom was packed with community members who had come to support her. She could see her parents in the front row, tears in their eyes but pride on their faces. "Tell us what happened that day," her lawyer said gently. Amy took a deep breath and began her story. Her voice was quiet at first, but as she continued, it grew stronger. She described how normal the day had started, how confused she felt when Officer Johnson pulled her over, and how frightened and humiliated she became as the situation escalated. "I kept thinking this couldn't be happening," Amy said. "I was raised to respect police officers. I never imagined one would treat me like that." Officer Johnson's lawyer tried to make Amy's story seem less credible. He suggested she was exaggerating or misremembering what happened, but Amy had prepared for this with Dr. Williams. She stayed calm and stuck to the facts. "The video speaks for itself," Amy replied when the defense lawyer questioned her account. "Everything I've said is right there for everyone to see." The most powerful moment came when Officer Martinez took the stand. As Johnson's former partner, his testimony carried enormous weight. Martinez looked nervous but determined as he was sworn in. "How long did you work with Officer Johnson?" Amy's lawyer asked. 2 years, Martinez replied. "I partnered with him when I transferred to that district." "Did you ever witness concerning behavior from Officer Johnson?" Martinez took a deep breath. "Yes, multiple times. He often used more force than necessary during routine stops. He seemed to enjoy intimidating people, especially those he thought couldn't fight back." The courtroom was silent as Martinez described specific incidents he had witnessed. He talked about how he had tried to counsel Johnson privately, but the behavior only got worse. "Why didn't you report these incidents earlier?" the lawyer asked. Martinez looked ashamed. "I was afraid. There's pressure in police departments not to report on fellow officers. I thought I could handle it by talking to him directly. I was wrong and I regret that." When Johnson's lawyer cross-examined Martinez, he tried to portray him as a disloyal officer seeking attention. But Martinez stood firm. "I became a police officer to serve and protect people," Martinez said. "Officer Johnson's actions go against everything I believe in. My loyalty is to the community, not to officers who abuse their power." Several other witnesses testified about their own experiences with Officer Johnson. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly woman whose grandson had been mistreated, spoke with quiet dignity about how Johnson had frightened her family. Kevin, the college student, described being humiliated during a traffic stop where Johnson seemed to be looking for an excuse to escalate the situation. The prosecution also called expert witnesses who explained proper police procedures and how Johnson's actions violated department policy and constitutional law. A psychologist testified about the trauma that victims of police misconduct often experience. When it was the defense's turn, Johnson's lawyer tried to argue that his client was following his training and that the situation had been misunderstood. But the video evidence made this argument difficult to sustain. Officer Johnson himself took the stand in his own defense. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Would he finally take responsibility for his actions? Instead, Johnson continued to justify his behavior. He claimed he was following proper procedures and that the situation had been blown out of proportion by people who didn't understand police work. "I was doing my job," Johnson insisted when asked about the incident with Amy. "Sometimes police work isn't pretty, but it's necessary." This response clearly frustrated many people in the courtroom. Even some of Johnson's supporters seemed disappointed by his refusal to acknowledge any wrongdoing. During cross-examination, Amy's lawyer pressed Johnson about the specific actions shown in the video. "Can you point to any department policy that authorized what you did to my client?" the lawyer asked. Johnson struggled to answer. "Well, I had reason to believe." "That's not what I asked. Show me the policy that says you can conduct that type of search during a routine traffic stop." Johnson couldn't provide a satisfactory answer. The more he tried to justify his actions, the worse he looked to the jury. Dr. Williams watched from the gallery, taking notes and observing the jury's reactions. She could see that Johnson's testimony was backfiring. His refusal to accept responsibility was making the case stronger, not weaker. During closing arguments, Amy's lawyer summarized the evidence and emphasized the importance of holding police officers accountable when they abuse their power. "This case isn't about being anti-police," the lawyer said. "It's about ensuring that all police officers follow the law and respect the rights of the people they serve. When officers like Johnson abuse their authority, it hurts everyone: the victims, the community, and good officers who do their jobs properly." Johnson's lawyer made one final attempt to portray his client as a dedicated officer who had made an honest mistake. But after days of testimony and video evidence, this argument fell flat. As the jury left to deliberate, Amy felt emotionally drained but also relieved. She had told her story, faced her attacker, and stood up for what was right. Whatever the jury decided, she knew she had done everything she could to seek justice. The community members who had packed the courtroom began to disperse, but many stayed to wait for the verdict. They understood that this case was about more than just Amy and Officer Johnson. It was about whether their community would tolerate abuse of power or demand accountability from those sworn to protect them. Dr. Williams put her arm around Amy as they waited. "You were incredible in there," she said. "No matter what happens, you should be proud of your courage." Amy nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. Soon, 12 citizens would decide whether justice would be served. Part 5. Justice and New Beginnings. The jury had been deliberating for 6 hours. Amy sat in the courthouse cafeteria, barely touching her sandwich, while Dr. Williams tried to keep her calm. The waiting was almost harder than the trial itself. "Juries, back," announced the bailiff, and Amy's heart jumped into her throat. The courtroom filled quickly as word spread that a verdict had been reached. Amy walked back to her seat, feeling like her legs might give out. She could see Officer Johnson at the defendant's table, his face pale and tense. Judge Anderson entered and called for order. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The jury foreman, a middle-aged man who worked at the local hospital, stood up. "Yes, Your Honor, we have." Amy closed her eyes and held her breath. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all charges. The courtroom erupted. People cheered, some cried, and Amy felt Dr. Williams squeeze her hand tightly. She looked over at Officer Johnson, who had put his head in his hands. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, he looked like he truly understood what he had done. Judge Anderson banged her gavel for quiet. "Officer Johnson, please stand for sentencing." Johnson stood on shaky legs, finally looking like the broken man he had become. Gone was any trace of the arrogant officer who had abused his power that day. "Officer Johnson," Judge Anderson began, "you violated your oath to serve and protect. You used your position of authority to harm an innocent citizen. This court sentences you to 2 years in prison, 5 years probation, and you are permanently banned from working in law enforcement." Amy felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but she took no joy in seeing another human being's life destroyed, even someone who had hurt her so badly. As Johnson was led away in handcuffs, he looked back at Amy. For just a moment their eyes met, and she saw something she hadn't expected: genuine remorse. He mouthed the words, "I'm sorry," before disappearing through the courthouse doors. Outside the courthouse, Amy was surrounded by reporters and supporters. Dr. Williams helped her navigate through the crowd to a small platform where microphones had been set up. "How do you feel about the verdict?" asked a reporter. Amy took a deep breath. "I feel relieved that justice was served, but this was never about revenge. This was about making sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else." She looked out at the crowd of people who had supported her through this difficult journey. "I want to thank everyone who stood with me, especially Dr. Williams, who showed me that one person can make a difference when they refuse to stay silent." Dr. Williams stepped forward. "Amy's courage has already created positive change in our community. The police department has agreed to implement new training programs, create a civilian oversight board, and establish better procedures for handling complaints against officers." Over the following months, these changes began to take effect. The new police chief, who had been hired after the old one resigned, was committed to rebuilding trust between the department and the community. Officer Martinez was promoted and put in charge of training new recruits about proper procedures and respectful treatment of citizens. Amy returned to her college studies, but she was a different person now. She had found her voice and her purpose. She started a student organization focused on civil rights and community advocacy. Her professors were amazed by the confidence and leadership skills she had developed. "You've grown so much this year," her favorite teacher told her. "What you went through was terrible, but you've turned it into something powerful and positive." Amy also began working part-time with Dr. Williams' law firm, helping other victims of police misconduct navigate the legal system. She discovered that she had a gift for connecting with people who had been through traumatic experiences. One day, about 6 months after the trial, Amy received an unexpected visitor at the law office. It was Johnson's wife, looking tired and sad. "I wanted to apologize," the woman said quietly. "I knew my husband was changing, becoming angry and aggressive, but I didn't know how bad things had gotten. I should have done something." Amy listened, with compassion. "What happened wasn't your fault. Your husband made his own choices." Johnson's wife wiped away tears. "He's getting counseling in prison. He's finally starting to understand how much pain he caused. He wanted me to tell you that he's truly sorry for what he did to you." Amy nodded. "I hope he can find a way to heal and become a better person. Everyone deserves a chance to change." The conversation was difficult, but healing for both women. They talked about forgiveness, accountability, and the importance of speaking up when something is wrong. Meanwhile, the police department was undergoing real transformation. The new training programs focused on de-escalation, cultural sensitivity, and constitutional rights. Officers were required to attend regular workshops on appropriate conduct and community relations. Officer Martinez had become a respected leader in the department. He often spoke at community meetings about the importance of police accountability, and the duty officers have to report misconduct when they see it. "We have to police ourselves," he would tell new recruits. "When we see wrong behavior and stay silent, we become part of the problem. Our job is to protect and serve everyone in the community, not to protect bad officers. The Civilian Oversight Board, which included Dr. Williams as one of its members, provided a new avenue for community members to report concerns about police conduct. Unlike the old system, these complaints were investigated thoroughly and transparently. Amy was invited to speak at the police academy about her experience. Standing in front of a room full of future officers, she felt nervous, but determined. "I'm not here to make you feel bad about being police officers," she told them. "Good officers are heroes in our community, but with great power comes great responsibility. You have the authority to change people's lives, so please use that power wisely and with respect." The young recruits listened intently as Amy shared her story. Many approached her afterward to thank her and promise that they would always remember her words. A year after the trial, Amy was preparing to graduate from college. She had been accepted to law school and planned to follow in Dr. Williams' footsteps as a civil rights attorney. At her graduation party, surrounded by family and friends, Amy reflected on the incredible journey she had been on. What had started as the worst day of her life had led to personal growth, community change, and a clear sense of purpose. Dr. Williams raised a toast. "To Amy, who showed us all that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, despite being afraid. You've made our community stronger and safer for everyone." Amy smiled, thinking about all the people who had supported her and all the positive changes that had come from speaking up. She thought about Officer Johnson, too, hoping that he was finding his own path to redemption in prison. As she looked toward the future, Amy felt excited about the work ahead. There would always be injustices to fight and people who needed advocates. But she had learned that when communities come together and demand accountability, real change is possible. The scared college student who had been victimized that day was gone, replaced by a confident young woman ready to spend her life fighting for justice and helping others find their own voices. Amy's story had become proof that even in the darkest moments, hope and healing are possible when people refuse to stay silent and stand up for what's right.